So my name's Phil Wilcock. I'm one of the co-founders of 2PintSoftware. Who has heard of 2Pint or knows a little bit about what we do? Okay, I'll do a quick kind of 2-minute who is 2Pint. So we've actually been around for 10 years now, based out of Sweden. I am not obviously Swedish, but I'm based out of London. So we pretty much focus on two areas. The first is network and bandwidth management. So we're talking about peer-to-peering, network throttling, network management, and the second area is OS deployment, and there's a little bit of crossover between the two. So OS deployment and the delivery of content within OS deployment. So that's the core of what we do. What I'm talking about today is some new stuff. Who's heard of Michael Niehaus? There's a few more hands, right? So he's been working with us for just over a year now. And we had this project for longer than that. The code name was Tallboy, and it's all about I would summarize it as modern OS deployment. So we're thinking in terms of, most people are familiar with task sequences. If you're using SCCM, Config Manager, or MDT, for instance, then it's quite a familiar concept. So we decided to take that and make it more flexible, and make it deployable via more modern management tool sets. Coincidentally, Microsoft decided to retire MDT. A lot of our customers use MDT, and we're asking about replacements because it's end of life now. So previously, we had contributed to an open source version of MDT, which is completely PowerShell driven. It's called PSD, and it's on GitHub, and it's it's free to use. And that had kind of limited success. So we decided to bite the bullet and create a full replacement for MDT that does a lot more as well. We wanted to be able to deploy different OSs, and that will be explained as I go along. We wanted to offer kind of a ready-to-go, out-of-the-box solution as far as possible. And it's kind of a base component for quite a few of our solutions, but the most recent one that we've been working on that works with DeployR is called our Recover solution. And it's about rapidly rebuilding devices from the cloud. So think about if you get hit by ransomware or any kind of disastrous event, or you just have a machine that's broken and you want to rebuild it. Then the DeployR is kind of the engine that sits in the middle of that, surrounded by our other core technologies around the PXE booting side of things, scripting, web services. We also wanted to involve the community. So this is basically the first kind of mock-up UI that we did, because we wanted it to be a kind of a familiar interface. This might be a little bit small, so let's zoom in. But you can see here, if you've used any kind of task sequence engine, it's kind of familiar, right? So you create a bunch of steps, deploy operating systems, run scripts, download applications. So we wanted it to be easy for people to just pick up and run with. So a quick summary of what it is and kind of how far we've got. So it's an OS deployment solution. It's also can be just a standalone task sequence engine. So some of the requests that we had from our customers, for instance, were we just want to run a task sequence as part of our autopilot process or part of our build process after autopilot or at any point, but we want to run it via Intune. So that will be possible. Just run a sequence of tasks, whatever they may be. Community platform, I'll explain a little bit as we go along. We wanted to have a version that is free to the community, that is also useful. And this is where we're looking for feedback at the moment, because this is quite reasonably early on in the project, as in we have a lot of the components already written and ready to go and working, and we can demo stuff, but what we're trying to decide now is what should the community version look like, and what should the enterprise version look like, functionality-wise, etc. So it is a work in progress, but we've run this session a couple of times now. This is the second time publicly, and the feedback at the first time we ran this was really good, and there was lots of really great questions, so that's enabled us to refine the whole process, because it's kind of a new concept. OS deployment in itself isn't a new concept, right? We're just laying down Windows. It's the same stuff that we've been doing for the last 20, 30 years, right? But it's a slightly more modern version. Still got a lot to do. From a technical viewpoint, these are the pieces that DeployR is kind of consists of. So we have the client pieces, which is the task sequence engine, fairly straightforward, environment storage, progress UI. We want to have a nice UI on the end user part of things, and then PowerShell scripts. So it will be partly PowerShell driven, and one of the ideas that we have is that we want to create a community space where people can contribute their own scripts as well. So if you've got a cool task sequence or something that no one else has done, you'll be able to contribute it, and the rest of the community will have access to that. And you could subscribe to that. We want to make it collaborative. So that's kind of the online services side of things. On the server side, we have a database, web services, which is where a lot of the intelligence happens, to control the scripting and the more complicated flow of things. Content storage, because obviously as part of a task sequence, a lot of people don't just want to install Windows, they want to have a bunch of applications as well. So we need to have the ability to store those applications. And there's a server UI, obviously, for the whole configuration side of things, which is the dashboards, where you can configure the task sequence and monitor it in real time. So some of the goals that we had, and that we've managed to actually get in there, we wanted to support as many operating systems and CPU architectures as possible. So we wanted to support ARM, obviously, there's more and more ARM devices coming around. But also we wanted to be able to deploy Linux, Chrome OS we can do. So we will add whatever's requested, basically. But we have the basic capability to now deploy Windows, Linux, and Chrome. It's built on .NET version 8, which is pretty new, but we've found it to be fairly stable so far. And also, we built it on ASP.NET Core, which means that it's portable, so it doesn't have to run on Windows, right? So in theory, as it says at the bottom there, in theory, it could run on an Android phone because it's a completely portable platform. So you could run it on a little Linux box, you run it on a Raspberry Pi, run it on whatever you like. Leverage is PowerShell 7 because it just gives you so much more than PowerShell 5. So we've decided to go for that. User interface is Angular because that's what we internally at 2Pint we've been working with a long time. So all the dashboards, etc., are all written in Angular. But yes, anything is better than MMC. SQL Server is the default kind of database platform that we went for because everyone's familiar with it, usually most of our kind of enterprise customers. But again, we want to make it as flexible and extensible as possible, so in theory you could use whatever database you want. So we will have different connectors. If a company decides to use different backend, then they can. For instance, a lot of our products use the ECENT database format, which is kind of the Exchange database format. More goals. we wanted to be able to support updates, frequent updates, because it's kind of a fast-moving picture. So we wanted to be able to test easily, and this is where we're hoping that the involvement of the community will be of benefit as well, so we can have a new release, get it out quickly, get feedback to keep it current. And like version 1 is going to be fairly basic, but we've got a whole roadmap of stuff that we want to add in there. So as soon as we get version 1 out, there will be more stuff coming fairly quickly. And one of the ideas of it being community-driven also was that these days there are a lot of blogs, and if you want to kind of come up with your own deployment solution, you've got to do a lot of copying and pasting from people's blogs and stuff. And one of the guys that works for us, Gary Block, for instance, he's done tons of work with the David Segura solution, OSD Cloud. And if you're familiar with that, that can be integrated with our DeployR solution and with our Recover solution. So we've been talking a lot to David Segura. Because his solution is very much community-driven, right? So we wanted to let people leverage what they've already done with that into our own kind of task sequence engine. So here's where it sits in the 2Pint stack. For those of you that are not familiar, StifleR is at the top there. That's our kind of real-time network management, bandwidth management solution. And then going down on the right-hand side, we have iPXE, which is our HTTP-based PXE server solution. That allows you to boot from the cloud, boot to the cloud from anywhere, and it's all secure, so our binaries are signed by Microsoft, so it's fully secure boot enabled. So if you want to go the full automated cloud deployment, then iPXE plays a significant part in enabling that. The Recover piece, which I mentioned, is about pulling all of the pieces together into a solution for rapid recovery. So it's something that you may or may not use every day. Some of our customers want it just there in case something bad happens. But what it gives you is the ability to rapidly recover a lot of machines at scale from a single instance in the cloud. So if you lose your on-premise infrastructure and everything is toast, then it will give you the ability to get up and running again. MOM is a component. It stands for metadata offloading and management. This is just kind of a cloud service that sits there and can create hashes to peer enable any content. So any content that currently can't be peer-to-peered, we can take that and cache it. It's basically a caching proxy. So it sits there and you can pull content like there's tons of stuff that just comes from the cloud, like vendor updates, driver updates, Google, Chrome updates, Adobe, and they all just come down and there's no peering enabled. So a lot of our customers have really compromised bandwidth. They have really low bandwidth links. So that enables them to download stuff much more efficiently. And we are, just to give you an example, we're talking to both Recast, Patch My PC, probably other vendors also, about helping to optimize their content downloads as well. The OSD Toolkit is that was our first kind of free bit of software that we released 10 years ago. And that's just a little toolkit that lets you add components into WinPE to enable it to do peer-to-peer and to download really quickly. That makes sense so far? Good. So options. None of this is set in stone, so I really welcome your feedback, either if we have time in this session, or you can just come and talk to me at the 2Pint booth. So Community Edition, it may be just a SaaS solution. So you will go and it will be a typical SaaS solution. You sign up for free. you subscribe to it, and you can do certain things which we haven't decided yet. You can maybe only deploy Windows, for instance, and not Linux. I don't know. Interested in feedback there. How useful? We need to make it useful, right? Or else people just won't use it. Enterprise version will definitely give you the ability to self-host this. So if you have your own server infrastructure, you will be able to self-host this. But also, obviously, if you want to be completely cloud native, then you can just have the SaaS solution or a combination of both. So this is that in a little bit more detail. So when we first started thinking about this, we thought we could actually have a pay-as-you-go approach, which is kind of a halfway between free community and enterprise. So interested in thoughts around that. So, because quite a few of our customers have said, well, you know, how are you going to license this? If we're not going to use it except in an emergency, then we don't want to pay for it all the time. But then it's kind of like insurance. You know, you don't get to pay for insurance part of the time. You don't get to insure your car like when you've had a car crash, right? So there's a lot of things to decide there. I think we're kind of moving away from the pay-as-you-go option, just for the case of simplification. It'll either be free or there'll be an enterprise version. And basically with the enterprise version, you just get everything. So it's more really a case of we need to decide what you don't get in the community version. So how does it scale? Well, one of the things that we are quite good at is scaling content distribution. We work with some really enormous customers, like our biggest customer is around 600,000 endpoints now. So our DeployR infrastructure is very scalable, and the reporting infrastructure within that is near real time. So if you think about OS deployment, one of the things that's often missing is the ability to see what's going on. If you're trying to deploy to a bunch of machines, you want to know, have they failed? If they failed, where did they fail? What stage are they at? Are the downloads happening quickly or slowly? Are we caching, appearing the content, all that kind of stuff. So that is going to be built in some way. So the whole DeployR enterprise version itself, standalone version, has really comprehensive reporting. It may be that with the OS deployment, we'll just focus on OS deployment reporting only. And by that, I mean autopilot as well. So we do real-time autopilot reporting, so you can see progress in real time as you're building machines. It's a bit of, not so much now maybe, but a year ago when we started this, there was a lot of misunderstanding where people thought it's either OS deployment or autopilot. And we use autopilot, so we don't need OS deployment. And it's not as simple as that. It's a lot of customers have found there are cases where you can't autopilot a machine for many, many reasons. So they want to get it back to a state where they can autopilot it. So there's a scenario in here where we take a machine that's broken and pixie boot it and just bring it back into autopilot. So you can still control it via Intune autopilot, but you get the real-time reporting as well. So I'm scanning this list here. We have, most of these are now complete. In fact, yes, all of them are complete. The peer-to-peer of all the cloud content was kind of the last piece. Client tools for troubleshooting. We have a set of remote tools within our DeployR offering, which is also a standalone product as well, and that's remote monitoring management, where you can do remote control. So we wanted to be able to do remote troubleshooting of OS deployment and or autopilot. So if you have a problem with the machine, you can remote into it and see what's going on. So what's left? Really the hard stuff, the building of the community platform. You would think that the free version would be easier to get out the door because it's free and it doesn't do as much, but actually to make it a SaaS solution is quite a big chunk of the work, right? So that's, we could probably release the enterprise version before the community version because it's easier to just do on-premise. Applications is quite hard to do as well because it's just complicated. As everybody knows, deploying applications is complicated. And RBAC is a big one as well, especially for enterprise customers. They want RBAC built in, so they don't want anybody to just be able to push this to any machine. So we're taking the RBAC work that we've done in StifleR and lifting that into the OS deployment side of things. So a little bit of a recap. What can we do today? We can do x64. We can do ARM64. We can inject drivers, which is a big, big ask from customers. So we can inject drivers on the fly so that when the machine comes up, it's actually functioning properly. Install applications and run scripts. So we can run scripts after the fact to do lots of customizations. Deploying Linux is actually fairly straightforward. So we can deploy Linux, but we can also install apps on there and run scripts. And we can deploy Chrome OS because we have quite a few education customers that run Chrome. And one of the issues that they have is, especially in like the bigger campuses in the US, they have maybe 10 or 12,000 machines that they just need to rebuild very, very frequently. So they need people to just be able to go into a classroom and their machine's just rebuilt. So yeah, we've got Chrome covered. It's actually fairly straightforward as well. What else can we do? We can integrate with other 2Pint solutions. So as I said, the iPixie piece is probably the main one that you would want to consider because it's just a logical way of kickstarting the whole OS deployment process. You Pixie boot, and from there, launch your task sequence, download your apps, run scripts, do what you need to do. And then also, we have the obvious integration with the existing stuff, with StifleR, and CacheR, which is our cache management, which is if you're an enterprise and you want to get into the nitty-gritty of where your content is, we can manage where all your content is cached on your endpoints so that you know the coverage. Like if you've got your install WIM that you need for your task sequences, you can make sure that that's pre-cached on a number of devices right across your enterprise. And that can all be automated. And then device recovery, which I've already mentioned. So applications is an interesting one. So we can host them, but it's really up to the end user. It's up to the customer. We can host applications, or you can link to your own repository. So we've got people using Winget, for instance, repositories, and we want to give people the options to link to whatever content source they have. So currently, we're looking at creating like a basic migration tool, for instance, from MDT. If you're using MDT, we can currently leverage Winget, whether it's a public repository or a private repository. Intune, obviously. UOnCloud, which is actually an MSP that we work with, and PatchMyPC, Recast, all valid application sources. So again, this is something that we'll add to because everyone has different ideas of where the content should come from. Timelines, I think this changed a little bit. This was a little bit pessimistic. I think things are going a little bit faster now. We have some extra dev resources because we went quite slowly at first because we weren't sure how people would react and what the demand was going to be. But now we've seen that there is a demand, and so we're ramping up the development a little bit. But at the moment, we are in the internal and customer testing phase. So we've got customers trying this out. Next year is the big push kind of thing, and by Q1 we have promised ourselves that we will decide fully what the free version looks like and what the enterprise version looks like of version 1 of both. And then we can actually, people will know what they're going to get. And by Q3 we're actually looking to release, hopefully. I know it says Q4 there, but I think that's more likely to be Q3 now. So you will be able to then, by then, know what the free version does, and go and sign up on the web and just use it, start interacting, uploading scripts, downloading scripts, all that cool stuff. So these slides are a bit new, and Mr. Niehaus kindly did these for me. So this is basically a little video of how you create a task sequence, and it's fairly straightforward, right? So we need to deploy Windows, so you can pick your image, add it, create a bunch of steps. So you can have, what we might do in the free version is you might be limited to a limited number of task sequences, for instance. But this is the UI that you'll be working with. You can see at the top left there it says Stifle R, because at the moment it sits in the Stifle R dashboards, but we will eventually lift it out into its own kind of platform. So we're trying to make things a bit more plug and play on the product side of things. But this is the interface. As I said, it's all written in Angular. And then this is just a look at the different steps. So here you can see the steps that we have. You can maybe zoom in that a little bit. It's fairly familiar stuff, right? So format disk, we're going to apply the OS, and then we're going to reboot and do some configuration. So it's nothing that people are not used to. So we wanted to make it as familiar as possible. So this, if it works, which I hope it will, is a video that Michael did for me. And it explains quite well the whole iPixie going into a DeployR kind of deployment. I'm sorry. So here we booted from, I think, and if you missed that this is an actual HTTP boot. So we've been working with a couple of vendors. And what flash? Yeah, so this is an iPixie menu. It flashes by a little bit quickly because we sped up the video. So we didn't want 10 minutes of staring at a menu. But that's the iPixie menuing system. So you can either have a default task sequence, so there is no menu, it just goes into it, or you can have a menu of options. So if this is going to be launched by one of your tech support people, they can have a menu. So you can launch troubleshooting tools, you can do remediation, whatever you decide. But this is now you're into the DeployR task sequence process. It's basically just laying down an image and off you go. So we've been working with Dell and HP to natively embed the iPixie functionality into the BIOS, right? So in the BIOS with HPs and with Dell and also with Lenovo, you can boot to the cloud natively. So you don't need to do a Pixie boot. You can do an HTTP UEFI boot straight to cloud service. So you'd put your URL in there, like recover.2PintSoftware.com, and you would boot to our iPixie cloud service, which would then download the iPixie network bootloader, which then kicks off the task sequence and all of that stuff. And here we are in Windows, and that is the basic kind of deployment where you've just taken it through and you're in Windows. And this next one is just slightly different scenario where we're using Recover to get a machine back into a state where you can use autopilot. So that's the UEFI settings in there. So the user would just boot. They would just boot, hit F12, and it would just go. So this is an HTTPS boot. It is secure because obviously we have a certificate on our recover01 2PintSoftware.com, and into the BIOS, what you do, you configure it with the thumbprint so that it's all secure. So it's not just anyone can kind of boot to that service. And this is the menu again, slightly different format of the menu. You can change the background, customize it to your heart's content. You don't have to have the big 2Pint logo there, obviously. You can put your own company logo, customize it, or maybe in the free version, you're stuck with the 2Pint logo. That's things like that we're looking at the moment. Where are we at? So do we have any questions at this point? Or comments or feedback? Do we think it's good or bad or bits missing? Yes?
Something of this stuff available now for tryout? Or?
Yes, on a selective basis, but if you're interested, just come and talk to me at the booth. Yeah, we're definitely looking for people to test this for us. It's getting to the stage now where we can say, yeah, here's a server, point it to this, do this, and give us feedback on that. So yeah, we'd be interested in that. So yeah, this is basically going to take the machine. It's putting Windows 11 bare metal on there, but it will take it to a point where it will go back into autopilot, which is a really kind of one of the main requests that we had was like, can I just bring a machine back to autopilot? Not very exciting to watch, but it does the job. Yeah, when you're testing this, you get used to seeing this screen a lot, trying to dream about it. So Dell, HP, looking at other vendors have approached us with regards to integrating this with their hardware. So there's a lot to do, like in the next 12 months, I think. So what's anybody doing today in terms of this kind of cloud recovery? Anybody using OSD Cloud, for instance? Yep. I know there's lots of people working with OSD Cloud. It's just a really great community tool. They've put so much work into it. Yeah, and there we are. Yes?
Will all Surface devices be...
Surface is a good question. Someone asked me that this morning. Yeah, we're looking at that. Surface are really, yeah, Surface. It's complicated, but we will have to kind of grasp the thorny subject at some point. We have guys testing it at the moment. Mike Terrell, I think, is doing a lot of testing over in the US, and Gary Block. But it's different to, I mean, the Dell and the HPs and the Lenovo, the process is kind of similar, but with the Surface it's not. So we have to come up with something to make it work. So this is just the Chrome deployment.
You hope for a phone call from Apple as well?
Apple is a tricky one, and someone else asked me that last night, actually. I mean, do we want to go up against the likes of Jamf? Not really. It's like they've got the market at the moment. It's something that we'll consider. It's like if the demand is there, then yes, we might look at it. So we've kind of done the easy stuff first. The Windows, because we know Windows, right? And Linux is easy, and Chrome is fairly easy as well. But Apple is, yeah, different. But then again, more and more of our customers are having growing population of Apple devices. So it's not unreasonable of them to ask, can we do the same for the Apple devices? So certainly not in version 1. Yeah, we've got another question there.
Doing for the speed to against the cloud, because what I've seen on the blogs and internet, and also calling with the Lenovo,
Yeah.
the cloud installation takes about 50 minutes or something.
Yeah.
Like that. I think it was very limited from the speed for downloading.
Yeah, I've heard that same feedback. The question is like, how is it for speed? Because vendors have their native kind of recovery solutions, right? The Lenovo, HP, Dell, they all have their recovery solutions. There's like HP Sure Start, is it called, I think? And then Sure Recover, yeah, etc. And I've heard also that the speed is an issue. The other issue is quite often that the vendor image is out of date. So it's based on old builds. And so even once you get it down slowly, then you have to start patching it. So we aim to provide an up-to-date image. So if you choose to get the OS from us, the good thing is that you can leverage the HTTP boot capability of Lenovo, for instance, but you're not downloading their image. So you can download it from our CDN or from your own if you want to. So you can have your own image that's fully patched, that's got all of the bloatware removed, etc. And you can download it as fast as you like. So we're not restricted by the slowness that some of the vendors have. Does that answer your question okay? Yep.
Can I customize the fully processed to a zero-touch deployment?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
No user?
No user interface, no menu. You can just have a default task sequence. Or you could even have some intelligence there that it could run something to determine which task sequence you need to run. So if it's integrated with iPXE, the network bootloader, although it is a PXE boot solution, it is really a tiny version of Linux, and it has its own scripting language built in. So you could create a script that just runs on them every machine and decides which task sequence they need to run. So yeah, it can completely be zero touch. Yep. That's about it, I think. The other thing to mention is, and something that actually took us quite a long time to get right, was the ability to build over Wi-Fi as well, because people want to be able to have a solution for their home users. So if a user's at home and the machine gets broken, they want them to just be able to rebuild from the home Wi-Fi. So that's all doable. I saw a great demo yesterday internally of just rebuilding a Dell machine just over home users' broadband connection, and it works really well. And you can actually, we have a little tool that lets you create USB. If you want to go down the USB stick route, you can actually put that iPXE network bootloader on a USB. So we have a little utility to do that, and then you can pre-populate the USB with content if you want to, and then it's really fast. Like the new little Samsung USB keys, like the data transfer rates are super fast. So we're not a massive fan of using USB sticks. But if you use USB with just the iPXE component, then one of the issues with USB is they're out of date, right? So if you use it and you have an OS image on it, then it's going to become out of date, and then it becomes a security risk, etc. So if you only have the iPXE binary on there, it becomes a viable solution that never goes out of date. But that's it. I think we're just about on time. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much for coming. I hope you found it useful or interesting. And as I said, feel free to come over and chat to us at the booth, answer any questions or anything that I've forgotten to mention here today. Thanks very much.